This is Ray Mofield again, and we're broadcasting once more with tape-recorded oral histories for the archives in Frankfort, Kentucky, the Pogue Library at Murray State University in Murray, and for the Marshall County Library. Our guest for this particular reel is Miss Margaret Heath of Benton. It's a pleasure to have her here, and we'll start off. I don't guess I'll get slapped. I'll ask her if she were born in Marshall County and when and how long ago and so on.
Born on the Court Square in Benton, Kentucky.
On the Court Square?
East side of it. There's a residence there about where Prince and that building there.
Mm-hmm. So that there were residences there that recently.
Put Stilly owned it.
Uh-huh. And you, could you tell us your father's name and your mother's name,
yes,
including her maiden name?
Yes, she was Daisy Darnell from close to Hardin, and my father's name was W.H. Heath, and he was born in Callaway County and came here in about 1903 or 4.
Now, for the benefit of genealogists, and they seem to be getting thicker all the time, do you remember your grandfathers and grandmothers on either side?
No, my grandmother and grandfather on my daddy's side died before he was 19, so I have no contact. My grandfather on my mother's side lived, who was married in Darnell, lived to be 96, but his wife died when I was 2 and a half, so I never had any grandmothers that I could recall.
Uh-huh. Well, I wonder, there are an awful lot of Darnells that have been here, and of course Henry Darnell, the Baptist preacher, was one of the very first settlers, some say perhaps as early as 1818.
That's right.
And they were at Soldier Creek Primitive Baptist Church, which still exists in the county.
My grandfather went there, and my mother was a member there, too.
Uh-huh. So you may very well have some of Henry Darnell blood.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
I do.
Well, good. That ties in. Not only, incidentally, I suppose some people know this, some don't maybe, but that is not only the oldest church in Marshall County, but the oldest church in the Jackson Purchase.
Yeah.
So we just put that in. Now, all right, do you know enough about your ancestry to indicate whether did they come from England or Ireland or Wales or Scotland or?
Well, yes, my father's. Clara Darnell can tell more about the Darnells on my mother's side because has that whole history of them, which I haven't gone into right now. But my father's people came from Virginia and were supposed to have left and started without one slave, and they'd freed their slaves and came as they came west, and then the slave wanted to go with them, so they brought the slave with them. And then my father his father had two brothers, and one stayed in Callaway County, and the other went on to Texas. So
the Heaths probably were English.
Yes, there's a Heathville, Virginia, and there's a Heath mansion there that John Heath was the founder of the Alpha Tau Omega fraternity, and I wish I brought that picture of that.
Alpha Tau Omega is the National Service Fraternity, I believe, and they're not so much one of the Greek social groups as one that designed to serve mankind.
That's right.
So on.
It was started there.
I'm a member of that.
Well, good.
So I happen to know ATO.
Then I had a woman from Texas visit me that works with the Genealogical Society in Texas, and I had a map of the Holy Land and parts of Europe that's framed that a man gave me from a 1763, I think, book. And when she was at my house, she said she could started tracing them from like the Holy Land, across Africa, up through Spain,
Mm-hmm.
down up to Ireland, came down through Scotland and England, of the Heath.
Yeah. Now, did you, I suppose you went to school in Benton. So
All
you
my life.
didn't go, as many of the people I interviewed, to a little one-room
No,
school
see,
at
yeah.
Oak Valley or
No,
somewhere.
I was thinking about that in thinking of this interview,
Mhm.
that I guess I'm one of the few right now that started in the first grade and finished here.
Yeah.
And I've always lived here except 1 year in Callaway County.
Uh-huh.
When I learned to walk in Callaway County, holding on to a turkey gobbler's tail.
Well, do you remember any of your first teachers?
Oh yes, Miss Brown and Miss Eads, whose daddy ran a hotel here.
Oh, now
Nanny
that's a
Eads.
name I haven't heard before.
Nanny Eads, and let's see, Miss Lucy Faust, who was Hattie Faust's sister, John Faust, who was superintendent of schools of Owensboro. She was one. Nell Washburn, Dr. Washburn's wife.
Oh, yes, I remember Miss Washburn. Lived next door to her once.
That's right. And Miss Saunders, Helen Morgan, who was Helen Shamble. Those were some of the grade teachers I had.
Mm-hmm.
And the Miss Saunders that I had, which made it interesting with connection with the Southern Harmony Singers, the book that was used as a pattern that Dr. Glenn Wilcox used
Mm-hmm.
was one that Miss Saunders, my former teacher, owned, and she was in his family, and he borrowed that.
Now, several people that I talked to say they just finished the 8th grade and they went to the superintendent's office and took a test. But by the time you came along, there was a high school.
Yes.
So you went on to high school, and
But
then
we had to we took an 8th grade test.
Oh, you did?
Yes, and the whole county.
That showed that you had mastered grammar school.
That's right.
And so you knew
Which
English.
Is still good. And my mother said when I took it and told about some of the questions, that it was as hard as the teacher's certificate
Mm-hmm.
that they used to have to take, to
Mhm.
teach. Because, of course, it was an 8th grade thing that they took it on.
So you finished at Benton, and then did you attend college in Hopkinsville?
Well, yes. I went first 2 years to Hopkinsville.
There was a Baptist college called Bethel.
That's the one I attended.
Very
Yes,
historic, and
very steeped in tradition.
it kind of made me sad that the state put it out of business by putting a community college
That's right.
free right beside it.
That's right. It was made coeducational later on before it was done with
At one time, it was a girls' school.
That's right.
Yeah,
It was all girls' school, and it was built by slave labor. And I have one brick that came from there, and then became co-educational.
Now, eventually, you received a degree from Murray State.
Yes. Went back to Murray and finished.
Mhm.
So you got your teacher's certificate. I got my teacher's certificate from Bethel.
Uh-huh.
And then I did graduate work at the University of Cincinnati.
Well, did you...
And I went up one semester to Bowling Green.
Mm-hmm. When did you decide you wanted to be a teacher yourself?
From the time I can remember. And when I lived here in Benton, after we moved from this place on the east side of the square, I lived at the house that's west of Cliff Treacy's.
Mm-hmm.
And gypsies even were still coming to Marshall County and to Benton, and they would camp down in the apple grove
Yes.
down there. And what was I talking about? So I lived there, and as a little girl, for teachers, they always had summer institutes, and they'd have maybe a week of them, and then they'd have recreational things for the teachers at night. Well, I attended those as a little girl before I even was able to go to school.
Well, great. So you're definitely one that liked teaching.
Like teaching.
And you didn't go into it simply because you couldn't find anything else to do.
No, I just love children, love people, and that.
Well, with that kind of an attitude, you taught a good many years before you retired.
40, go ahead.
Tell
I'm
us,
proud of it.
Yeah, fine. Tell us some of the, or if you can remember
Yeah.
any of the maybe amusing incidents or some of the outstanding pupils you had? Or...
Well, the trouble is I would have them scattered all over the United States. Oh, I taught my first school after I had gotten my certificate from Bethel College. I meant to go on to school and got to teach, and it was at Oak Level, all grades.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you taught a
one, yeah.
school.
I wouldn't take anything from the world. I was called the town
And that
girl.
forced you to teach 6 different grades.
Mm-hmm. And I had...
And every subject.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I had 72 enrolled. 22 were pre-primer. Not primer, pre-primer.
Well, you've answered a question for
right.
me. Now, someone on one of the tapes that I've made this far said that they thought the limit for that you couldn't have more than 32 students.
Oh, no.
But now I told them
My
I didn't
mother
believe there was such a limit, but anyway, I couldn't prove it.
No.
But if
Well,
you
I
had
can prove
7...
it. I can prove it.
Okay.
Because I know I took over a school that somebody didn't, their certificate didn't meet the right requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And the school had been going on for 3 weeks when I got there on Monday morning after I'd gotten to school. They did a petition to get me to teach. I never really applied for school in my life. And so with it, I stayed down in Oak Level, down with the children, and I'd gather the children up every morning. We'd walk about a mile and a half to school.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was an experience I wouldn't take anything in the world for. You started teaching at 4 o'clock. I mean, at 8 o'clock in the morning.
And you went till 4.
You went till 4. And we brought our lunches, and it was during the Depression. It was 1930.
Mm-hmm.
And
what did you make?
I made $72 a month.
You were rich, weren't you?
Paid $14.
Room and board.
From Friday till from Monday till Friday. We had no car. We had a taxi in Benton then, running by Willie Egner and Joe. So they'd be at my house at 7:30 every Monday morning. And I'd go to school, and they'd take my bag. Then I moved over across from the school as Arabs lived on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Friday afternoon, they would have gone to my room and picked up my bag, which was already, and be sitting out in front of the school at 4 o'clock to bring me home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go, this little...
That's colorful.
Yeah. And what was so interesting is, because people in the county appreciate this, too, and I had to put those 22 on one recitation bench that had never been painted, but we painted it the year I was there. It was made out of poplar, and it just swallowed the paint. But there's another interesting about this. Yes, because my mother I didn't dare complain about 72 enrolled, and 72 came till I expelled one girl for size.
Now, your mother had taught that many?
At Hardin.
So she knew that it could be done.
Yeah, well, I never complained and never did in all my teaching when they'd say, oh, I have so many in my room. And I had as high as 64 at one time here in Benton.
Mm-hmm.
And the fewest I ever had was 27.
And some of them scream now if it exceeds 28, that's supposed to be.
But your old-time country school, we helped each other. And they listened. And when I started out there, I let there be known there were 2 things that I would not take. And one was size. And another was defacing public property.
Yeah.
And I stuck
with
it.
They learned 2 good lessons, if no more.
That's right.
Out of those right there.
Yeah.
Well, that certainly is fine. So you then eventually...
Now, that school, they never had any music or any art. And the only pictures that were on the wall was George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and one map.
You managed to, somewhere or other to teach those things, though, didn't you?
Oh, yes, because every morning, Monday morning, I had my car full of the taxi, and they couldn't wait to see what I'd brought that time.
Yeah.
because it was a time of sharing. And I also went around and stayed with pupils at night and visited in their homes and got to know their families.
So you learned, and
Yeah,
and you got cooperation,
that's right.
of course.
That's right. I had wonderful cooperation. I had moved a boy one time that was a tall boy, and I had a girl that wanted to look back all the time and with it, and so I just asked him if he would help Miss Margaret, and he said, well, yes, he'd be glad to. I said, would you move up on the front seat on the outside where I had some 8th and 7th, and let this girl sit on the back, because the thing was, she was too much like I was. I was going, she wanted to see and talk and hear. And he said yes, but he didn't tell when he went home that he was helping me. They just told him he'd been put up on the front seat. He's living today, Kenny Jarvis. And the next morning when I got to school, the children said, they met me and said, Miss Margaret, there's an awful bad daddy over at school. And I said, well, you all just go ahead. They clung to your apron, string there. And he said, what has my boy done? And I said, not a thing. Mr. Jarvis only cooperated with me. And Kenny hadn't defended himself at home. He was good old steady, crying just like he is now. And I said, he's helping me with the discipline problem. And from then on, everything was all right. He said, that's all right. But he was angry. He was white around the And another time I had a woman that came.
It just depends on how you do
right.
things many times.
That's right.
Yeah.
I taught a fire prevention thing. I had a little boy that smoked. And I warned him several times. And so he came to school one morning. I smelled smoke. He's in the 3rd grade. So I just told him to empty his pockets in front of the whole school. He had 3 packages of cigarettes. And I said, well, now's a good time to help Miss Margaret. And I took a tablet back, and we tore up 3 packages of cigarettes right in front of everybody. Then we went out and took this. I said, everybody in the whole school went out on the playground, which was very dusty. And we were sort of like Elisha with
the 450 prophets of Baal.
We put our thing, we did rocks around, we dug a trench, we filled it with water, then I had the boy set fire to his own cigarettes. I never smelled any more the rest of the year.
Yeah. Well, good. Oh, those are some of the most interesting things I've ever heard.
Well, that's the thing, one thing, and of course you've done it on when you've been off at school or off at work. If you stay in the locale where you were born, that's been one of the beauties to me of seeing and being with people I enjoyed.
Some people say you can't do that, but you found that you could.
You can. You can, and be happy.
Yeah.
Be happy. Not some things I would have changed or rather done at certain times maybe, but year in and year out. You can't beat this area of Kentucky.
Of course, it would be unfair to ask anybody just ad-libbing to try to give a list of the famous people they'd had and so on. Did you have John Clay Lovett?
No. Now, John Clay, he went to Benton School. He was here. He had his son.
Well,
had his son.
Yeah. When did you come into the Benton system?
1931.
31.
Until last year was the first time I'd ever missed a KEA meeting since I came into that system, which I thought was very fortunate.
That's
I've been able to do
you
that
kept
long.
Contact with the
That's
profession.
Right. Yeah, I stayed with it.
Stayed right on.
That way. So those were.
Now, you taught 3rd grade after you came to Benton.
Well, 2nd grade for about 7 years. Yes.
Did you finally teach 3rd?
Yes, that's what I ended up with and helped with the music in high school when Paul Bryant was here. Well, Agnes Johnson was here, 1 or 2 years, and then Paul Payne Bryant came in. With it, I started to say something. Oh, yes, what I was so proud of with this country school was so many of my Oak-level children came on here to high school.
Yes.
Yeah, see, that was most rewarding to find. I had Faye Gatlin and nearly all of her children that first year I taught school. And then they moved here later on, you see. And most of them graduated from Benton High School.
And an awful lot of them in that era and in that area would not have gone on to high school.
The place I stayed at, Thomas Carper's, where I spent a week, in Thomas R. Carper, that still lives down in that area, went to school for me the first year he went to school. Well, then I moved up across from the schoolhouse there to Oak Level, and their son was supposed to come to, this had one son, was supposed to come to Benton as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, he just believed he'd stay and go another year to me.
Yeah.
So he did.
Uh-huh.
And then he came on here and finished.
Now, this is terribly interesting, but everybody I've interviewed, I've asked a few questions about what Benton was like, and they'd say, well, you ask Miss Margaret.
Oh.
And I've tried to find out when they paved the streets.
Well, back to Oak Level now, going back there, that was 1930. They had told me what, here in Benton, people teased me that I would, in teaching in a country school, I'd get the itch and lice.
Mm-hmm.
I had no cases the whole time because I started inspecting children first thing of a morning. And they got it in Benton School that year. And they were putting in the installing waterworks. I wore my galoshes, I think, once or twice out at Oak Level, but I had to wear them nearly every weekend I came in here because they were installing
They were putting waterworks. Was that 29?
Well, see, it's over into 30. See, I taught in 30. That way. It was still doing, you see, and the streets were still torn up.
29,
of course, we didn't
30,
pave our streets
31.
till WPA
34.
came in.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. I guess, well, whenever it was, it started.
After city water, I guess you really didn't have sewage for a good number of years after that, did you?
And really, with the old-time fire bell that was in the courthouse yard, a fire at night was a social gathering early because everybody went.
Mm-hmm.
See, it was those things we did in Benton, everybody did them.
Mm-hmm.
When you had revival meetings, if you had a play, but people attended because that's all it was. Anyway, one interesting thing that I enjoyed so much, and I was in the grade school, and I don't know whether anybody's mentioned it, is that Byron W. King was a Lyceum lecturer from Philadelphia that came here and would stay a week and teach drama and theater, besides giving interesting programs at night of his own. And in the
part
week,
of the Chautauqua.
well, it was all that, but it was an independent thing from Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And the first good violinist I ever heard, or pianist, in a way, he
We're
brought
in
in
Benton.
here.
Yeah.
But this man was a person that in a week, out of the high school students, he would choose characters of a Shakespearean play and at the end of the time give the Shakespearean play. You like to know, I know she's passed on this last year, Ruth Johnson, that used
Oh,
to
yes.
was a page in the thing, and she had a hesitancy of a stud, but she didn't that night. And John Bondridge, Charlie Bondridge, was a king in the play, and they had their costumes and everything, and all that was done within a week. So you know the practice and the memorizing that had to go on. And he chose his characters after he got here. And those were highlights.
It's surprising that he had that much...
He had that ability. And then he took with it. I know we had people here that stuttered, and in a week he stuck those people working with them back even then. Now that was in the early 20s.
Yes. So, we haven't learned so much, have we?
No. I just thought of how I would love to meet and talk to him. Now, I wasn't afraid of him. I talked to him all the time as a child. But it was something that and Philadelphia then was as far away as Moscow.
Oh, yes, of course.
That's the only way you travel is by train.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I interrupt you. But those things are so, and like with your fire system, that way, as a child, when I'd hear the fire bell, I remember the courthouse burning.
Was this 1915?
About 14 or 15, yeah. Yeah, 15, because my brother was small, and I stood in the window and watched it burn. That way they didn't let me go. But, and I remember, all the stories that went with it, too.
Now, you mentioned your brother. You have one brother.
One brother.
He's a physician.
Yeah, a surgeon. Yes,
and
but
is
he's retired,
in
Louisiana.
New Orleans?
No, Alexandria.
Alexandria. Yeah. All right. Well,
back to your streets paved.
yeah, we got the streets paved
and we got our new school. Oh, I might tell you that I graduated as the last class from the old academy building, the two-story building of school, and the next year.
It had roots back to 1869.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's with it.
And then you built what that generation called the new school, I guess.
You built what was the new gymnasium back there, and then the front part was torn down later on when they had that front part, and that's been built twice, rebuilt, I think, twice. That was the one where the present grade school is now is done like in 35, I believe. My mother broke her, then, 34, 35 started that way. But, and when the new gym was built there, that 1928, people laughed at Mr. Chambers, who had come there in 27 as superintendent of schools, of making it too large.
Yeah.
And it was filled the first time we had a ball game. So, of course, the stage was at the end, and the grade school was underneath.
Yeah.
And Adolph Rupp visited our school and chose some of his ball players.
Well, talking about Rupp,
yes.
Wasn't there a state superintendent who was superintendent of schools at
Harry Peters.
Harry Peters.
Harry Peters
was in Benton.
Was in Benton. Came here as county school superintendent, and then he went to Hopkinsville. Was Christian County there. And then he was state school superintendent. Harry Peters married Iva Solomon.
So that was a Marshall County name, wasn't it?
Yes. See, he gave me the best lesson on sports that I ever had, because it used to be open air out on the basketball courts. And, of course, we had such a rivalry, having 8 high schools here in Benton, in Marshall County, besides all the one-room schools, that there's another time I attended an institute with my mother at the Old Hardin School, and Jack Wells had given part of the program playing, upstairs, like you remember.
I remember Mr. Wells.
Yeah. And I'd visit the Byron Johnsons, and with it. So I wanted to see Cherry Corner and Calvert City play basketball. That was one of the invitations. My mother, we'd gone up on the train. My mother had to come home on the 1:30 train, and Harry and his wife were courting. And he said, well, let Margaret stay with us, and we'll bring her home. He had an old-time Ford, one of the first coupes that you've seen.
Yes.
I still can see it. And so when the game started, I was so against Calvert City that I hollered for Cherry Corner. Just jumped up and down. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, young lady, if you can't holler for your county team, keep your mouth shut. And I did. And it was a good lesson.
Yes.
And with it, I never forgot it. I still feel like he clapped his hand there.
Well, very fine. Now, let's see. In the time we have remaining, can you remember any highlights of the changing of life in Benton, like, say, the coming of radio? You remember your first radio?
Yeah, well, yes. And just a few people had one at first, Atwater Kent.
Oh, that's a brand name, and I remember that.
And I know, of course, whoever had one, with it, that's where your young people went to hear things. And we would go down to Brother L.V. Henson's And sometimes you'd have to put on earphones, and he said, well, he must have one of the best ones had because you get 3 or 4 stations at a time.
Oh, my.
But and even when I went to school at Bethel, WHOP was with it, and to get to perform over that, and I got to, in going to school, play a piano solo, but to hear it, they had a radio in the parlor, but we hooked up these little ones to the, and with the headphones, as girls, to the springs of the bed, and we'd have to get out flat on the thing and spread the thing, and one person have this earphone, and another person be right close to have the earphone so we could hear WHOP.
Yeah.
And that was really something to be able to listen to a station.
I should say so.
Oh. Spread the thing, one person have this earphone, and another person be right close to have the earphone so we could hear WHOP.
Yeah.
And that was really something to be able to listen to a station.
I should say so.
Oh. Well, see, we had a hotel, three hotels here in Benton. And another interesting thing was that traveling men, my daddy being in business, hardware, and he was in the funeral business too. He had the first motorized hearse, and of course they had the old horse-drawn hearses. But in place of, I noticed in this list of things, they would come to your house and buy their casket or coffin.
Did it say Morgan and Heath or something like that?
Well, but at first it was John J.P. Peterson was with him first, and it was he was where the Margaret the Faith and Gun is now, part of that, and the rest of that was an old warehouse where they sold their oil and burro wagons and buggies, and kept a fence across there, and then they would come to your house and you'd go, and then they'd take your the casket or funeral home in a wagon. And so the director didn't go all the time to see to a funeral because people like you set up with the carts at home. Yeah. They'd sew for them. I know my mother said the first person that she ever did was Miss Bertie Gardner. That was the Gardners. What were all the names? You know.
Out of Hardin, Dow Gardner.
Dow. It was their sister.
Yeah.
Their sister. And I know that she thought, well, I just can't sew for this person, but I did. You did, and then thought of it as a privilege that you were able to do something to help out in the death.
I'll tell you, 30 minutes has gone in a tremendous hurry.
Well,
is there anything special you'd like to put on?
No, it'll come to me later, as other people say.
If you could tell half that's happened on your historical society trip.
Yeah, really, that's right. I could entertain a crowd. That's
right. Well, it's been a real pleasure to have.
Well, it has, and I hope and I appreciate you all taking the time and effort to do this, because I know you're on your vacation now, and you're interviewing, all this. So we appreciate what you and Shelby have done, too.
It's fun, and as well as work, and so we're happy to have you. And this has been Miss Margaret Heath, and I'm Ray Mofield, and the broadcast has been produced for the State Archives in Frankfort, the Murray State Library at Murray, and the Marshall County Library, courtesy of WCBL, and that's our broadcast for today.
Goodness.